Okay, now it's time for, I'm going to start with Tony. It's time for each of you to pose a question that your opponent will answer first, and then you will answer. So Tony, you're posing the first question, some issue, something about Brook Park that you'd like both Jim and yourself to address.
Well, I guess a direct question is, I maybe answered it earlier, I'm not sure, but I'd like to hear it again. Would you support a 0.5% tax increase for earmarked sewers and roads programs?
That's an interesting question to pose. As you know, it's been debated a lot. It's not a question that I don't think it's a question that can be answered with just a simple yes or no. As I stated before, I think if you're going to pose that type of a question to the community, you have a responsibility to show them exactly what it's supposed to be for, have a detailed plan for it. And to just sit there and say it's for streets and sewers is not a detailed plan. You'd have to have a list of streets you're going to be doing, how many you're going to be doing a year, how much money it's going to cost, and is there any other hidden costs that are in there. You also, in the meantime, before you go ask people for more money, because we have to remember that the tax rate is already 2%. You're talking about going from 2 to 2.5%. You're increasing the taxes. I've talked to many people in the community that have not had a pay raise for the last 5 or 6 years. So if you ask them for more money, they just don't have it. Their utilities costs have gone up. Much like the cities, everybody's costs have gone up. However, as I stated earlier, $16 to $17 million used to be the city's income tax. They're over $18 million now, $18.5 million they're approaching for this year. So while the residents haven't been getting more money, the city is getting more money. The city had an appropriations that they could have reduced $2 million out of the payroll. They didn't do that. So it's very difficult. I would have to say that I could not support a tax increase going to the ballot until I see a change to the way that the city operates first and shows a little bit more responsibility on their fiscal behavior.
Okay, Tony, now it's your turn to answer your own question.
Okay, we did have a list of streets and did have a list of sewers. I don't know if Mr. Astorino got a chance to take a look at those publicly, but there was about $10 million in streets and about $10 million in sewers. That equals about $20 million. We were going to get about $27 million in taxation. We did have a valid plan that we would have put in place to show the residents before anything happened. We did have a 5-year plan as far as what I looked at, I wanted to do, or I would have showed to people, because the legislation went from the mayor, when he pulled his name out of it after he vetoed it, with my name on it and the rest of some of the city council members. And I certainly would not go to the people and ask for any money, especially after 25 years of not paying a tax hike since 1991, I believe it's been, to go ahead and just tell them we need this because of this. Definitely, we had a roads plan, a sewer plan, and again, that's the building of the trust, showing them a plan, asking them for the money, investing in the community, implementing the plan, going back after we did the right thing, showing them that we are doing what we need to rebuild this city. And again, it's some of the people, which I have, again, apparently different people than my opponents talk to, understand what they need for the city, and they want a better city, and they're willing to pay for it. They understand that sometimes, like other cities, they pay for their frontage of their yard for taxation. They pay for sewers and streets through that. They pay for the recs through levies, and they pay higher taxes, about $1,000 or $2,000 more than we do per year. So, of course, more money in those areas can buy more, and we are looking at everything as far as how to maximize our dollars and do what we can for the residents of Brook Park.
Okay, Jim, your turn to pose a question that Tony will answer first, and then you'll get a turn at it.
Okay. I guess the question I would have is, over the last year and a half, I saw a situation where legislation wasn't introduced in a timely manner, and we ended up having to have a special election about the tax increases back in 2014. And then we had an issue with the compensation for the elected officials, that the ordinances for that had to be in 30 days before the filing date, so that had to be in at the beginning of May of this year, and that didn't happen. Even though that legislation was introduced to council back in October or November, it just saw no activity. And then we just recently had the situation with this tax proposal that the mayor put out. It sat in committee for a long period of time, and then we just missed an opportunity to get it to the ballot, simply because the mayor sat on it long enough to do his veto so that it couldn't get to the Board of Elections in time. So the question I would have is, as council president, since you weren't able to do it as the finance chairman and keep these legislation on schedule, how would you be able to do it for all of the legislation that's out there?
Well, simply put, as you understand, council president builds a consensus throughout the membership of the council. As finance chair, you're allowed to talk to your council members and discuss with them whether or not they want to put something forward or not, and build a consensus through that. All the pieces of legislation you're talking about were brought up by, for instance, different people, sometimes 3 different pieces, like the monies for the council salaries, and they were all over the board. One for $700 per person, $8,400, one for $54,000, one for $40,000, and no one could get a handle on what they wanted to do. So consequently, talking to the members of council and seeing that no one came to me as the finance chair, as I talked to them and asked them which piece and what do you want to do, council, no one. Collectively, 2 or 3 or more put it together to go ahead and pull these pieces out. So, you know, it's all over that at this point in time with those pieces of legislation. There's been many different things that happened with the other 2 pieces of legislation. We put that piece of legislation, this last one, on the dais, and we were voting on it. I guess the thing is that the mayor had his name on the legislation, making an adjustment of 5 years, again, being a good adjustment, making sure that the people understood it was not forever, because no one wants to get taxed forever. The mayor, surprisingly, which he did have the veto power, vetoed it. Unfortunately, that didn't pass because of his veto power. And I would definitely, as a leader of council, making sure that legislation did hit out of the committees, because there's a time factor on it. If in fact the council person who's the chair does not pull those pieces out, 3 council members could go ahead by themselves and pull those out by signing and asking for them to come out.
Okay, now Jim, your question to Tony was specific to some of his activities, so you're going to have to slightly reword your own question in order to take a turn answering it, but I'll leave that up to you to see whether you want to discuss what you would do in similar situations as council president maybe, or take it whichever way you want.
That's kind of the approach I wanted to take, was to actually explain what the mistakes I've seen that council's made in the last several years. It's not just been 20 months that council's been making these mistakes, but we all talk about the good old days in Brook Park when Ford Motor had a lot of employees and we had a lot of tax revenue. But back in those good old days, even the city of business, council used to meet 4 times a month. They met the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays for council meetings and the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays for caucus meetings. They made that change several years ago, and they just make it so the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays of each month they meet. From 7:30 to 8 o'clock, they have a caucus meeting. And then at 8 o'clock, they start the caucus meeting. Now, on occasion, the caucus meeting runs over. But as a council president, I would change that aspect. I think when you have money that is infringing a little bit on the expenses, you have to have more work sessions. You hear about, my opponent talks about they have a plan for this, they have a plan for that. However, nobody's seen those plans. Those plans are supposed to be done at either the caucus sessions or at the council meetings. It's something, that's the meeting where the people get the information. So I would make sure that we'd have more caucus sessions. Also, you saw that this last tax levy was introduced at June 16th, which was the last session before the summer recess. They take July and August off. What other part-time job, what full-time job has 2 months of vacation, 2 months of time off, especially when we have this difficult economic and all these challenges? We'd work during July and August with me as council president. You know, these other people, these last council people, they were doing minimal effort and nothing's getting resolved, nothing's getting fixed. So that's what I would do different as council president. We would work harder for the community. Thank you.
Okay, do we have time for another pair of questions to each other? Okay, Tony, your turn then.
Well, I guess the question I had thought about it was directed at my opponent. I did not know when I was asked whether or not they were for both of us. So
They are for both of you.
okay, so at this point in time, I do not, and I have to decline for another question.
Okay, Jim, your turn to pose a question.
Yeah, I would have to say that the question I would ask is, as my opponent has stated, I was a fire union president for many years. and I've had an adversarial relationship with the administration, not necessarily to a bad extent in my estimation. It was just a matter of we have a different things going. So but what that allowed me to do over a period of time, not just within this community but with other communities, is to learn that as strong leaders get together, that you learn to work together on things. But as I stated earlier, there was an article done by Mr. Siegel that was in the paper where it mentioned that my opponent identified that the mayor has a take it or leave it personality, but that he tends to vote with the mayor's support. So the question I would have is, if you're doing that, as council president, how is council president? I've got a proven track record of standing up for the people in the community, and standing up for the firefighters, and standing up for everyone else in the community. Your record seems to be a question of going along or working behind the scenes, but not getting things accomplished. So the question would be, how, I know I have the strong leadership to be the council president and make sure things are done for the betterment of the community. How are all of a sudden you going to start doing it when you haven't been doing it up till now?
Well, it's a funny question because you kind of turned the question around on me, what I've said to you, how are you going to do it when you've been doing it all along the other way too. The thing is, the truth of the matter is, I described the mayor with those words as a descriptive to what his personality was, and just a description of him. When I was asked by Grant Siegel, I did not say the last part about I vote with him more than whatever percentage of time that was. I don't know whether or not you wrote that or you think I told you. I did not say that because obviously my track record of talking on council, I voted against the mayor on a number of occasions. When I thought he was wrong, I voted against him, and I'll continue to do that. But I have the ability to discuss things with him, and I think that I could go ahead and create a great, I guess, connection between council themselves and the mayor and get things done in the city. As far as my track record, I don't know how you come up with my track record being something that I've been working with the mayor too much, or however you're trying to describe that. But my track record, I guess, will speak for itself come November 3rd. The people who understand who I am, the people who do want me as council president will vote me in based on my past performance and what I've done on council, not what you're describing.
Okay, Jim, and once again, if you slightly edit your question to apply it to yourself.
Well, I think it's a matter of, as a council president, I would use my life experiences. I've run an organization. I run the union organization where there are many times that we would have a 2-day conference and there were 30 or 40 union presidents in the room, and it was my job to chair that meeting and make sure that everybody had a fair chance to speak, that proper procedures were followed, that the professional decorum was there, that people weren't doing the personal attacks that we see at today's council meetings. There wasn't a berating of your opponent. There was a discussion on the issues. Like I said before, we have some serious challenges that we're facing right now. And we cannot allow our council meetings to lower to the level where it's just somebody making a personal attack on the other person, saying that their idea is bad. Let's tell them why it's bad and how we can make it better. Nobody's idea is bad to the point of we just throw it away. Everybody comes up with different experiences. To sit there and say that he's got a proven track record of cooperating, we've seen situations where there didn't seem to be a communication between the mayor and council, and so legislation was dropped, legislation was missed, which cost us special elections that we had to have. It cost us elections that we didn't have on matters that both sides felt was very important, but neither side was able to actually get it, and the scheduling wasn't done. The job of a president of council is to run the business of council. I've been running organizations for over 15 years, and I've been doing it well. I can do it for the city of Brook Park well.
Well, thank both of you for speaking to us, and thank the viewers for joining us. Please check out upcoming races for other Brook Park Council seats, and check out cleveland.com to read about the debates, the issues, and the candidates for the November 3rd election. Early voting starts October 6th. Thanks.